for organising this weather for us. Former Fire Chief Greg Mullins wants to show us the hazards of the season to come.
Sydney Tower, X-ray Sierra Victor Hotel 6, ready with the waiver.
An instructive way to do that is from the air.
X-ray Sierra Victor is airborne.
Even in the heart of the city, the omens of summer are on the horizon.
So this smoke has come down from the lower Hunter Valley, a couple of big fires yesterday.
Greg Mullins is a spokesman for the Climate Council, which paid for this short flight.
Look, this is what's been happening with climate change. Our windows to do hazard reduction are just getting narrower and narrower because of the drying effect over decades. And then as soon as you get hot temperatures, you're into fire weather, so you just can't burn, it's too dangerous.
The wet years since Black Summer will influence this season's fires.
Unfortunately, that wet weather, it stopped a lot of hazard reduction burning because it was too wet to burn. But it's also led to prolific growth, and we just look down below and what I'm seeing is houses butting up right against thick bushland that hasn't been burnt for years, and it really can be a recipe for disaster.
This fire, in a steep gully north of Sydney, is under control, but such hot, dry conditions are a problem.
I've only seen conditions like this once before, this early in the season. That was Black Summer. The earliest they've ever been recorded was the 6th of September 2019.
The only way out of Cabana is on fire, guys. Look.
Black Summer ignited the Royal Commission into Natural Disaster Arrangements, which made 80 recommendations, many of them broad and complex, like improving national preparation and cooperation between states and with the federal government. Brendan Moon oversees these changes as head of the National Emergency Management Agency.
We're sitting today in the National Situation Room, which now gets almost real-time data feeds from around the states and also from the Bureau of Meteorology. So we have an almost real-time understanding of the threats that are appearing in the Australian landscape. That allows us to better coordinate Commonwealth assistance for those jurisdictions that require it.
So essentially for Tennant Creek, they've made a lot of work in the last couple of days. The issue is going to be on Thursday, Friday, where they're encountering a weather change.
It was basically a grassland fire that was moving very, very quickly. But we saw the local authorities, we saw support from New South Wales, South Australia, rapidly contain that fire. So we're still dealing with that. We're seeing pockets of fires in southeast and southwest Queensland, also throughout New South Wales.
It's currently at 31.
The Royal Commission called for consistent national fire warnings. That's done.
We've seen what fire can do.
Tonight, bushfires unleash their fury across the country.
So we've used our knowledge to change the fire danger rating system.
What we've seen since the Black Summer bushfires is we've actually developed a consistent and coherent approach to bushfire risk.
Work's well underway on systems that will give instant access to critical data on the fire ground and allow crews from different states to talk more easily with each other.
There's been some work, particularly between Queensland and New South Wales telecommunications authorities that's actually enabling now people from different states to switch over to channels that they can all talk on.
But other reforms have been slower. The Royal Commission called for a national aerial firefighting fleet, instead of relying on waterbombing planes leased from nations like the US and Canada.
But increasingly, their fire seasons have lengthened by months, and our fire seasons have lengthened by months, so they overlap. And when we need those big firefighting assets, sometimes they're just not available, and they won't release them.
I think, as identified in the Royal Commission, there has been a need for a further conversation about, do we require a sovereign national air fleet? Research is already underway now to start to articulate what that actually looks like.
A nationally owned fleet, coordinated in Canberra and piloted by Australians, remains elusive.
I think that I think we've got a long way to go on that, and you know, New South Wales has certainly invested in that. We own a large air tanker, we own a Chinook helicopter, we own another 6 aircraft also like helicopters. So the government's invested quite heavily in that, but I think what needs to be done also is to look at that from a national perspective as well.
How much of a concern is the Blue Mountains this summer?
This week, the New South Wales aircraft are moving along the state's coast to deal with blazes hundreds of kilometres apart.
If you've already got an air tanker and a Chinook, why is it important to have a national capability?
Well, I guess because New South Wales is the only state that has those at this point. So, and whilst we help other states and territories are more than comfortable doing that, I think it's things that, you know, there needs to be capacity elsewhere as well. You won't just be able to get by with just having one air tanker here all the time. There needs to be more capacity in the system.
The Royal Commission also called for mandatory consideration of natural disaster risk for new developments. Planners are beginning to take fire and flood risk into account, but rules are inconsistent and piecemeal.
We need to really focus on where we live and what we build. So land use planning and building codes, building guidelines, will be an important part of how we mitigate flood risk and fire risk into the future.
For homes already at risk of fires, floods and cyclones, much of the risk and responsibility rests with the residents.
Would you be buying a house in the Sydney urban bush interface?
Well, that's where I live. So
yes,
and that's why I'm a firefighter, because you've got to do whatever you can, but increasingly the odds are stacked against us as firefighters, because on the worst days you get catastrophic fire weather, and on those days you can't fight fires, you just have to run for cover.
The threat this season is front of mind in the New South Wales south coast town of Cobargo, where Zoe Pook's home was destroyed in Black Summer.
Everyone feels very edgy in town. That's a conversation that we're all having. There's been a couple of grass fires already, and that's made everyone very nervous. So we don't feel great.
She and her partner have cleared around the property, conducted their own controlled burns and rebuilt their home to meet strict new bushfire attack level requirements.
We've got aluminium frames on all the windows. Our fly screens are metal to protect against ember attack. We've also got sprinklers on the roof, which are fed from a concrete tank behind the house.
But in Australia in 2023, there's a sense that may not be enough.
Now that we know it can happen to us, we're always going to be on edge, so I'll probably never feel prepared. We might be physically prepared. We've got tanks, we've got pumps, my partner's got a lot of knowledge, but emotionally I think we're always going to feel a bit unprepared.